Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we are on Module 2, Lesson 13, and we are going to continue with subtraction. I just want to kind of remind ourselves of our steps that we've been using. So remember, we are first going to always set up our problems vertically. Then we are going to find common denominators, and which is the least common multiple is our least common denominator. And then we can add or subtract. And then we are going to fix any improper fractions if we have them. And remember, improper fractions are fractions that are greater than 1. And then if we know how, we can simplify. So those are our 5 steps that we're going to continue to be using. Okay, so we're going to keep using those regardless of what the book tells us to do. Okay, so today I'm going to do the first 2 by myself. So my first problem says 4 5/8 take away or subtract 2 3/16. And some of us are forgetting to always put our line in our subtraction sign. So we're going to make sure we do that. Okay, the first thing I did is set it up vertically, and now I need to find my least common multiple, which is my least common denominator. So when I look at 8 and 16, the first thing I notice is 8 fits perfectly into 16 because 8 times 2 is 16. So that's kind of a trick to find it. So I'm going to use 16 as my least common denominator. So I'm going to set up my entire problem. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I'm going to set up my entire problem with a new denominator of 16. Okay, so now that I've done that, I made sure I have my whole numbers. I made sure I had space in between. And now I'm going to ask myself what my new numerators are. So what happened to my 8 to become a 16? Well, I multiplied by 2. So I'm going to multiply my numerator by 2 and get 10. What happened to 16 to get to 16? Nothing. Nothing changed, so my numerator is not going to change either. So now my problem says 4 10/16 take away 2 3/16. So now that I have common denominators, I am able to subtract. So 10/16 take away 3/16 is 7/16. And 4 take away 2 is 2. Okay, this is not improper because this is less than 1. And I can't simplify that. So I am completely done. That is my answer, 2 7/16. Okay, I'm going to do the next one for you as well. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is set up my problem vertically. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is make sure I have common denominators. So the easiest way is when the small one fits perfectly into the big one, which this is the case here. 6 fits perfectly into 12 because 6 times 2 is 12. So I'm going to set up my entire problem with denominators of 12. And again, notice how I'm lining up fractions, I line up whole numbers, I left space in between. So what happened to 6 to become 12? It was multiplied by 2. So I'm going to multiply my numerator by 2 and get 2/12. What happened to 12 to get to 12? Nothing. So I'm going to do nothing to my numerator. Okay, so I did step 2, and now I'm on to step 3, which means subtract. So 2/12 take away 10/12 is not possible. I cannot do that. Because if I only have 2 of something, I can't take away 10. So I'm going to have to regroup or borrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take away the whole. One of those wholes I'm going to take away, which leaves me with only 8 wholes. Okay, and what I did with that one whole that I took away is I cut it up. I cut it up into pieces, but I still have all of them. So I actually cut it up into 12 pieces. So I cut it up into 12 pieces, but I already had 2 pieces. So really what I end up with is 8 wholes and 14 out of 12 pieces. Because this right here equaled my 9, and I already had the 2 12ths. So I needed to make sure I added those. So this is equal to all this and equal to this. I'm just writing it differently. So now I have 14 twelfths that I can take away 10 twelfths. So I get 14 take away 10 is 4 twelfths, and 8 take away 4 is 4. Now this is not improper, so I don't need to fix that, but I can simplify it. 4 twelfths is the same as 1/3. So those are both my correct answers. Okay, so let's do some of these together. So on number 3, let me get my right pen. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our problem. So I have 8 and 1/4. Take away 5 and 7 twelfths. Okay, so I lined up my fractions, I lined up my whole numbers, and I see that they have different denominators. But I also see that 4 fits perfectly into 12, so that's going to be my new denominator. So I'm going to set up my whole problem with a 12 as my new denominator. Okay, before we go on, check that you lined up your fractions each time. You lined up your whole numbers. Do you have your subtraction signs, and do you have your lines, your problem lines? And hopefully you had space in between. Okay, so what happened to the 4 denominator to become a 12 denominator? It was multiplied by 3. So we're going to multiply our numerator by 3. What happened to the 12 denominator to become a 12? Nothing. It stayed the same, so our numerator will stay the same. Okay, so now we're on step 3 and we're ready to subtract. 3 twelfths take away 7 twelfths is not possible. We need to borrow or regroup. So we're going to take one of the wholes away, which leaves us with 7 wholes. And we're going to cut that one whole up into 12 twelfths. But we already had 3 twelfths. So we end up having 7 wholes and 15 twelfths. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I wrote sloppy there. We end up having 7 wholes and 15 twelfths, and we're going to subtract 5 and 7 twelfths. So 15 take away 7 is 8 twelfths, and 7 take away 5 is 2. So that is our answer. And again, this is not improper, it's proper because it's less than 1, so I don't need to do that. I could simplify it, which this is equivalent to 2 2/3. And we're going to practice more of that one later. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one. I'm going to fold my paper really quickly before, because it's kind of getting in the way. So let's look at our next one. And it is 8 and 5/16. So we're going to set it up vertically. Subtract 7 and 3/4. So we're going to set it up like that. So make sure you lined up your fractions, your whole numbers, and you have your subtraction sign and your problem line. Okay, so we need common denominators. So the easiest way is when our small denominator is fits perfectly into our larger denominator. And it does, because 4 times 4 is 16. So we're going to use 16 as our new denominator, as our least common denominator. And again, check how you set it up so far with space. So what happened to 16 to become 16? Nothing. Nothing changed, so nothing's going to change with our numerator. Okay, what happened to our 4 to become a 16 denominator? It was multiplied by 4. So we're going to multiply our numerator by 4 and get 12. Okay, now we are ready to subtract. So 5/16 take away 12/16 is not possible. I don't have enough. So we're going to borrow or regroup. We're going to take one of these holes away, which leaves us with only 7 holes. And for this problem, we're going to cut it up into 16 pieces. But we still have all of them. So this is still the same as 8. But since we already had 5/16, we have to remember that we have that as well. So we have a total of 7 holes, and 16 plus 5 is 21/16. And we're gonna subtract 7 and 12/16. So our answer is 21 take away 12. We're able to do that now, which is 9/16. And 7 take away 7 is nothing. So our answer is 9/16, which is a proper fraction. It's a less than 1 fraction. So we don't need to change that. And we can't simplify it. So that is our final answer. Okay, the expectation is this is how we are setting it up, ladies and gentlemen. We're not doing these steps in our head. The more steps you do in your head, the more chances you'll make mistakes. So this is exactly what your homework should look like. Okay, so your homework tonight is 3 problems, and they give you plenty of space to work all the way across. All right, have a good evening.